It's ironic that it's Mother's Day today, and I have chosen to talk about this topic. Not a coincidence, I'm sure. In the growth mindset industry, it is believed that 95% of trauma is multi generational, meaning that one family or tribe or culture passes on their life experiences and memories to the next one. Let's go further. Let's start about my own experience and inheritance. Over the course of working with clients, searching for the cause or genesis of an issue, it's now an automatic approach with me. I always want to go to the cause of why someone feels the way they do. So, some of my habits that I may have ignored now urge me to look further. As I said, it's become like a habit with me. And one of my habits is not wasting anything. Get the best use of something till the absolute end. I grew up with the family motto of waste not and want not. Whether it is food or clothes or household items, we were taught to recycle and repurpose. There were difficult times. My parents had come from a country that had been divided, and they had lost everything that they owned. So, coming back to this behavior of waste not and want not, underneath this virtuous and practical behavior, I realized that there is a fear. It says things are scarce, make do with less. You may not get it again. Where did I get this from? My mother, of course. She was the queen of creative revamping. Even with her meager finances, she managed a bright and beautifully creative home and kitchen. I remember coming home from school to find the furniture was rearranged. The chairs would look new somehow, being, a little new cover uh, with a slight throw rug added to it. And of course, her plant baskets would transform everything. But her high functioning creativity came from a latent dread of being left with nothing. And she was left with being the breadwinner for the family, even before my father had passed away very early. Now, where did she get this from? From her mother, of course. Much later in my life, I learned that my grandmother, widowed at 20, brought up four kids in dire circumstances. Betrayed by my father's family, she was left alone to not just bring up her kids, but to build a home, educate them, and settle them in their future lives. And all this from an impoverished life. So the mortal fear of being penniless again ruled her life. And no doubt she passed it on to all her children. Even though my mother's life was not as drastic as my grandmother's, her underlying stress affected her children. I naturally was more aware of my own trauma, but later I saw the effects of this in both my brothers. So I too did not go through the same experience as the generations before me, but I was left with the wound of what they went through. My point is that if my grandma had resolved the trauma of her life, she would not have passed it on. And if my mother had dealt with her stress differently, I would have had the opportunity to learn and move on, which I hope I have done to some reasonable degree at least. So, 95% of trauma is multi generational. If it is unresolved, it is passed on, which really means that it is the responsibility of the next generation to complete the cycle. So the purpose is to learn, to transform, to grow, and to be aware. So the purpose is learning, transformation, growth, and awareness. One of my experiences was when I was teaching in Germany. I worked with some Holocaust survivors, and it was amazing that they still carried the emotional wounds of those traumatic years. Whether their memories were verbally accurate or not, their body kept the score. Some call it phantom pain. You may have heard of this before, which are the ghosts of past pain. We feel things and we don't necessarily know why. We don't know the source. We relive everything we don't consciously know. The body holds these experiences as symptoms, like, for instance, headaches, insomnia, phobias, obsessions. This reminded me of how often, when we are expressing something emotionally stressful, we are told, it's not a big deal, just forget about it. You'll get over it. So if a trauma is unspeakable and too difficult for the mind to digest and too painful to even express, guess what? It gets passed on. So unspoken suffering doesn't just disappear, it becomes more severe. It is cumulative, piled on, and gets worse. For example, cultural poverty. Like some people, even if they're rich and they have lots of, money, uh, they have a poverty consciousness. They can't spend easily and they hold on to things miserly, maybe. Then there are sexual mores for women uh, that are also piled on to us. We never question them. Or say the denial of emotions in men. This becomes our denied, unprocessed, unintegrated past. Unintegrated past. Even if the facts of our ancestral heritage are clear, in knowing them, we have a greater responsibility to complete that cycle of resolution and growth. Through forgiveness and acceptance, we can move on. We can forgive those that wronged us, and more importantly, forgive ourselves. We can change. Because as you move away from justification and blame, you not only heal yourself, but you heal the generations before you and those that you procreate even in the future. When we heal ourselves, we heal our ancestors from wounds that run very deep. When we heal our ancestors, we heal the world from wounds that run deep in humanity. Feel this. Think about it in your lives. And stay with this until we meet again.
That was this week's episode for the Cellular Alchemist podcast with spiritual psychologist Ritu Malhotra. Don't forget to follow the podcast and join us next week for yet another episode. Thank you for listening.